It's well known that Ainz, the overlord of the Great Tomb of Nazarick and leader of the 41 guild members, isn't exactly the sharpest tool in the shed, and he often seems to not even be in the shed, since he is oftentimes ignorant of what's happening around him. And this isn't just speculation. For starters, our overlord took over 7 books to even remotely realize that the Great Tomb of Nazarick was planning world domination, something akin to what Pinky and the Brain attempted each episode. Ainz had no clue about until the 7th book. Like, imagine Harry Potter only discovering magic exists in the 7th book, or Jon Snow learning in the 7th season of Game of Thrones that he's actually… well, never mind that. Moreover, Ainz has consistently been out of touch with what's happening around him. For example, he simply wanted to fight in the arena of Arwentar in order to recruit adventurers for his guild, but due to his complete ignorance of diplomatic protocols and customs, he fought in the arena without the Emperor himself being informed. This led Yerkniv to conclude that Ainz was pursuing a highly intricate plan to sabotage him and his future alliance, leaving him no choice but to surrender and offer his empire as a vassal state to avoid the wrath of the undead king. It has also become a meme by now that Ainz still doesn't know what exactly happens on the Happy Farm and who's being farmed there. Furthermore, privately, Ainz was far from well-educated. While in his world he was relatively well-educated, in the harsh and dystopian future of our world, this merely meant that he had completed his basic education, and his mother had literally worked herself to death to finance it. In other words, Ainz had little classical education, and was thus mentally unequipped to keep up with someone like Demiurge, who was blessed with all sorts of demonic knowledge. Because Demiurge is not only intelligent, but was also granted an enormous wealth of knowledge at his creation by Ulbert Alain Odell. Nevertheless, there were 3 very memorable moments where Ainz Ooal Gown did indeed display the diabolically brilliant overlord type of intellect he often merely pretends to has. The first moment I want to highlight is when Ainz held a typical conversation you'd expect from a ruthless undead overlord. When Cocytus and Ainz Ooal Gown were on their way to the hot spring, the one that Nazarick had on the 9th floor, they discussed the topic of Schäärgocks and revenge. Revenge for the fact that the blood-red Valkyrie had been attacked and mind-controlled by an as-yet unknown enemy, forcing Ainz to fight against one of the beloved NPCs of the Great Tomb, whom he considered as children of his dear friends. Cocytus agreed and thought of the saying, "An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth," which today seems like a brutal form of revenge, harming someone in exactly the same way they harmed you, like taking their eye if you lost yours. But Ainz was against this. Not because he found this form of revenge too brutal, but quite the opposite. Because Ainz knew that this form of justice originally existed to establish equality between the attacker and the victim, ensuring that everyone, no matter their status, formally had the same rights under the law. At least on paper, it ensured that even the lowest-ranking citizen could seek retribution for an injury in the same way as the highest-ranking citizen could. And this type of justice also had a second fundamental component. It served to limit excessive revenge. If someone lost their eye, they could only take the eye of the offender in return. They couldn't break every bone in their body or take any additional revenge on top of that. In other words, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth was meant to limit excessive revenge. But Ainz didn't want that. He explained to Cocytus that he desired excessive revenge, far beyond what had been done to Schäärgocks. This was a real classic undead overlord moment, which came as a surprising twist in this otherwise slice-of-life-like 8th volume, and it showed that Ainz had absorbed a significant amount of knowledge from Tabula Smaragdina, Punito Mo, Ulbert Alain Odell, and others. Next, we have Project Utopia. It's an incredibly ambitious plan that Ainz Ooal Gown is pursuing, one so out of their world that not even Demiurge or Albedo can fully understand it. Ainz truly wants to create a utopian state, a nation known for peace, wealth, and prosperity, which would be the complete opposite of the poverty, misery, and dystopian world, with no natural ecosystem that existed in the future of mankind. It's a complete counter-design, so peaceful and benevolent for everybody that Demiurge and Albedo can't comprehend it. Both Demiurge and Albedo are convinced that all this talk of coexistence and kindness, about soothing the fear from the other citizens and nations and showing that peaceful coexistence with the NPCs of the Great Tomb of Nazarick is possible, even though they are undead, demons, and other heteromorphic beings, was all just a trick to lull the world into a false sense of security, so that when the time came, Nazarick could strike completely unprepared enemies, dominating and brutally eliminating all opponents, namely all outsiders with minimal losses, are just subjugating them brutally. And the reason why Ainz wants to do all this is equally incomprehensible to Demiurge and Albedo. Ainz wants to improve the reputation of Ainz Ooal Gown, the guild's name, by associating it with a peaceful and beloved kingdom in the eyes of the outsiders. The third and final point is everything related to combat, strategy, and tactics. Ainz has devised an extremely intricate, multi-layered, and concealed plan, actually several plans, designed to draw out the enemies who attacked Schäärgocks from the shadows. First, Ainz fought Schäärgocks alone to use himself as bait, with the intention of trapping the enemies with the world item depiction of nature and society, so he could capture them all at once. This way, they would not only collect information from the suspected players who attacked Schäärgocks, such as why they targeted Ainz, the Great Tomb, and Schäärgocks, who sent them, how many there are, what items they possess, and where their guild base is, but they would also gain significant bargaining power. If half of the players from an enemy guild were caught in his trap, the other guild's NPCs would naturally be willing to do anything to bring back their creators. This would greatly strengthen Ainz's position. Also, the battle against Platinum Dragonlord was also brilliant. First and foremost, Ainz didn't fight personally. He had Pandora's actor represent him, and deliberately let Albedo be lured away to make this fight happen. The entire battle wasn't intended to be won, but rather for Pandora's actor to gather as much information as possible from the opponent, and that's exactly what Pandora's actor did. He went even further than Demiurge or Albedo ever thought was possible or appropriate by kneeling down and humbly begging for his life in front of Platinum's armor, something that was scandalous for Albedo and would probably only be considered by Ainz's personal NPC. And this pragmatic approach to the battle is something Ainz had learned and internalized as a member of one of the top player-killer guilds. This immense experience was something Platinum lacked. Also, not only did Ainz gather extensive information about Platinum's armor, magic, and world items, but he also fed Platinum plenty of false information regarding his own strength and abilities. This misled Platinum to the point that he suspected Ainz might actually be an NPC, and that Albedo was the player. He even considered that Nazarick might have 2 world items. This isn't entirely wrong. Nazarick can indeed use 2 world items, but it doesn't just have 2, it has 9 others as well. Still, Ainz was cautious enough to say that he might have to lose another battle against Riku Aganea, as the Dragonlord called himself, in order to be certain of how to defeat him on the 3rd attempt without letting him escape. Ainz also discovered that Platinum's armor was just an armor, controlled from the outside, something that Platinum failed to realize since he had no idea that the Ainz he fought was actually Pandora's actor. In other words, in this case, Ainz was truly the Overlord, the brilliant tactician and strategist that he pretends to be. His expertise in this battle and in this information warfare far surpassed that of Demiurge and Albedo, and it was even completely incomprehensible to Pandora's actor. In other words, Ainz Ooal Gown was the smartest person in the room for once. So, now it's your turn. What did you think of the video? Ainz's genius on his fields of expertise? And which other moments do you recognize where Ainz Ooal Gown was truly clever and brilliant? Let me know in the comments. Okay, bye.